you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. As promised, I got Connie Alleyne. She is going to be discussing today the medical perspective of what happened at Forsyth County with the restraint of John Neville. Now, we did a video, me and Louis Soto. We broke down a custody perspective. We did highlight a good working relationship between medical and custody, but I wanted to get Connie on. Unfortunately, at the time, Connie was one of the 700,000 people that were affected by a power outage. And because of that, Tier Talk was also affected, believe it or not. Tier Talk was paging her every day, every minute. Hey, how you doing? Everything good? Hey, what about your power? You know, yeah, I care how you're doing, Connie, but how's the power? So, Connie, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Sure. Connie Alleyne here from the Civilian Corrections Academy, also from the Fly Behind the Wall podcast and Conversations with Connie. I come to you guys with tons of experience in corrections as a prison health services administrator, and certainly looking at the video sort of made me tap into my past life as an EMT, but also, you know, as an administrator, we did many reviews of security division tapes, looking at these events and really analyzing what was happening. So, you know, I think that, yes, the tape looks awful, but I also feel like if you understand what goes on in a facility operationally, you'd be not so inclined to judge.
Yeah, me and Louis Soto mentioned that too. It looks awful to the untrained eye, someone that doesn't know what it's like to be in our shoes and deal with the experiences that we deal with. Now, guys, I'm not going to replay the whole 2 videos. I did that in the last one, so if you haven't seen the videos, please check out the video I did with Louis Soto, because that's going to have both videos. What I'm going to do is I asked Connie to timestamp, you know, whatever she needed, and that's the videos we'll be discussing. So there'll be portions of it, and they're not long. We're going to try to keep this video short, but we're going to stick to just 3 clips from these 2 videos. So we took out 3 clips from these 2 videos that we're going to break down that Connie believes carries the most weight when reviewing this video from her perspective. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and when we come back, we're going to take another trip to Forsyth County and discuss the medical perspective of what we feel happened with John Neville. All right, stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, and we're back. So again, guys, it's just going to be a quick breakdown. Connie has given me 3 parts from the 2 videos that we're going to focus on. She's going to break it down. But before we do break it down, the reason why it's great to have Connie on is Connie has two perspectives here. At one point, she was a union rep. Also, she was on the administrative side of medical. So she kind of has an understanding of what both sides are looking at, I think, from a frontline perspective, but also from that administrative side. But before we break into that, Connie, what was your first thoughts when I sent you the video that me and Lewis did and you got a chance to see both videos in context?
So the first thought was, I think because you sent me actually just the news clip at first. And so I saw the news clip, which of course left out a lot. I think the news clip was maybe like 8 minutes. And so to have this additional information certainly did give good context to what was really happening. But even after watching it, there was still so much missing from the video that I feel that anyone who's ever worked behind the wall could understand that there was so much that probably took place before medical and custody got on the scene, and that's not documented. And there's a lot of questions that I had just in general, like what shift was it on? Why is it there was only one medical person responding to the code? Was there someone else outside because it was such a tight space that we were working in? I mean, I just had many, many questions, which I think, if you only focus on what you see, you may be like, oh, well, look at how they did it, look what happened. But I think as you listen to the dialogue, you could hear that there was no malicious intent. You could hear that, the officers were like trying to attend to his needs the best they knew how, while still trying to maintain or contain the security threat that was presented. And then you have the nurse who comes in who's trying to follow some protocol. I don't know what their protocol is. There certainly are standards, I think, to responding to a possible seizure. But without knowing what her protocols are, it's very difficult to judge that she's done the right or wrong thing either way. And I just don't want anyone to get the, feeling that this is about the judgment. It really is just, what do you see in the video, and is this something we could have done different or done better? And there's always going to be something, but if you've never worked under pressure in that way, you probably will never understand what that nurse was feeling.
Well, I think if people watch the channel long enough, they know that we try not to Monday night quarterback. We do try to provide information because this is a channel that's informative. It's educational. And I don't know if you guys hear some noise in the background. You probably won't, but we have a code going on upstairs. My wife is trying to put the two kids to sleep. And my youngest, who is 3, decided that she would take a nap at around 6 p.m. and wake up at 8 p.m. So, yeah, there's a battle here. It's like I can hear the battle. Yeah. So, I'm trying to I hear a little bit of it. I know that's the youngest one because she's a screamer. But yeah, again, it's not to Monday night quarterback. It's just to give a perspective. And I feel that we do have qualified people here to at least give the perspective, because I'll be honest with you, if it doesn't come from us, it's going to come from the news. It's going to come from people who don't have that experience, who only show about 30 seconds of what is about 44 minutes in total. 19 minutes for one video, 25 minutes for the other. So at least we were able to really provide a better context. And actually in the first video, we showed everybody everything. That was the intent, believe it or not. The intent was, yes, me and Soto would do a little bit of something after the video was over. We didn't want to create a bias, by the way, but the real intent was to let people see the 45 minutes, the 19 and the 25 minutes, because it wasn't being shown. So I wanted people to have a context instead of just the clip and then have someone else narrate that. But yeah, so as I said, me and Soto touched on the custody side of things. I thought there was a great interaction between custody and medical. So before we go into the clips that you chose, real quick, I just want to do something general. How did you think, or what did you think of the relationship between custody and medical during this whole scenario?
Well, I mean, I thought that there was good communication between custody and medical. And, I feel like even at the point in the second video where, the officer's just not sure, like he doesn't hesitate to call medical back in. I think it was a level of respect, as the situation escalated. The nurse removed herself from the midst so that custody could do what they needed to do. I know that some may agree or disagree with that. You know, she could have did more, or if she was around, she could have seen something from a different angle. I mean, all those would have, could have, should haves are there. I think at the end of the day, though, it was a pretty decent communication between custody and medical.
Right, and there are two tough questions which I know are coming your way at the end of the video. One is what the nurse is being charged with, possibly involuntary manslaughter, and the other is when you feel medical should take control over custody. Is there a time for that? And that's where, you know, sometimes there's a jockeying for position. Be honest with you, I didn't see that at all in this video. I didn't. But was there a time where maybe medical should intervene and, you know, taking the reign? So, again, we're going to show three clips from the two videos. Why did you pick these three clips? Why did you give me these timestamps?
So I picked these three specifically because I think we needed to see that the nurse was attempting to follow a protocol. She didn't just come in scattered. She was very methodical about what she was attempting to do. And I think we needed to see that, because some may question whether or not she knew what she was doing. Is that why she didn't intervene later on? I don't think that was the case at all. I think it was clear she was trying to do what was appropriate in the situation. And as the, you know, incident escalated, she had to remove herself from the mix of things. The other one I selected, you know, at that point, the offender is laying on his stomach. I'm not sure how long he had been laying on the stomach, but I think it was important to note that on top of him being on his stomach already, there was additional pressures being added to his back, which I don't think that it was intentional. It looks like there was a shifting of positions, but I feel like it could have contributed to his inability to not breathe. And now, I think the last one, I think really just shows that although the nurse wasn't in the room, there's a point where she is asked to come back in, and it looks like she is attempting some medical intervention, but it's clear that she's upset about it. She's worried, she's anxious. Even after she leaves the room and she's standing outside the window, you know, she hasn't walked away. She hasn't abandoned post. And I think that's something, you know, something needs to be said about that.
Now, we cross into the end of the video after we do all three, and then we go over the tough questions there. I'm going to go over an article I just got from the North Carolina, from Corrections One. North Carolina Sheriff's Office changes restraint policy following inmate's death. So, obviously, there was a fault with policy, and I'm hoping that they don't hold the officers responsible and then change the policy. I mean, that to me is messed up. That happens a lot, you know. If there's a faulty policy, then in my mind, that's more the agency and not the staff that were following it. Me and Soto did mention at that time there was a moment where he should have been held up in a restraint chair because, you know, when the handcuff key broke. But again, we'll go over that at the end of the three clips we're going to show. And by the way, guys, if you haven't seen the first video, I'd recommend you see it because we're just going to dive right in. We're not going to break down what we already broke down before. So I'm going to hop us into the first video. So bear with me while I set it up.
So I think what really is important to note here is that the nurse is talking to the offender. She's calling him by his first name. She's trying to help him come through. I mean, the reality is that he is in this state of altered mental status and he's really not, he doesn't really know what's going on. But she continues to try to intervene, and I think it's important that we note that she has attempted to check his pupils to see if they were dilating. She then also tries to do blood pressure, which could give her much more information about what's going on. And I think we also have to understand that we're seeing this video. We don't know if he fell from that top bunk. We don't know exactly what happens. So she's just trying to do a quick assessment to figure that out. And shortly thereafter, this escalates. I mean, people say she could have said more. Perhaps she could have maybe educated custody about what goes on with someone who's just had a seizure, explain that his combative behavior is just part of the process. But I don't know that she can confirm that he actually had a seizure. But in the meantime, she's still being professional. She's still being appropriate. She's still having communication with him so that she can get him where he needs to be so she can provide some sort of intervention or support.
You wake up and you need to talk to me. You're okay. You're okay.
Okay. So that's the first video.
No.
So let me go ahead and get back to us.
And I also want to just note the no, as far as him getting up. I feel like people may not understand, like, so your blood pressure can change significantly with like that quick motion of just trying to get up. So he could have probably hurt himself even more if, in fact, they actually let him get up. Aside from him being combative and all those other things in the midst of that, anyone standing right up after having possibly a fall like that, you know, clearly there was something else going on, and it could have been more damage done if they would have allowed him to get up at that point.
Yeah, and it's made evident that he doesn't know where he's at, because in the second video, she asked him, do you know where you're at? And he pretty much says no. And, you know, again, that's where custody was coming in, including the nurse as well, and trying to give them every step that they're going through to try to make them familiar with what's happening. You also mentioned something about the nurse may not really know how much time he was actually having the seizure for, because she responds, but we don't know how long he was off the bed. So you mentioned that there could be concerns when you have a seizure that, let's say, goes past 5 minutes, correct?
For sure. So any seizure that goes beyond 5 minutes is already considered a medical emergency, like an escalated medical emergency. And I feel like in this case, we don't really know how long either he was having a seizure or how long he'd been on the floor. That information is missing, and I think that information is critical information.
Right, and that's something, again, she may not have been aware of because she's coming on the scene, but it's already, the incident's already happened. It's happening as we speak. So I think part of it is she's trying to get an understanding, and that's where, you know, again, she's very calm. I find she to be very calm, very in control. And again, you can kind of see that partnership between her and custody, because they're giving her space. They're actually securing him and everything to make sure she can do what needs to be done. Okay, so we're going to go into the second video now, so stand by.
So this one, I am just a little more concerned with the officer's right hand that's adding pressure onto his back. So at this point, he's already been down for quite some time, quite a few minutes. And to see that additional pressure, and I get that, you know, officers are kind of shifting positions in order to get the handcuff cut. But the reality is that those shifts in position are certainly changing the amount of pressure points and pressure that's on the offender's back.
Yeah, this is where me and Lewis had the discussion, because this gentleman, John Neville, is on his stomach at this point for quite some time because the handcuff key broke. I mean, it could have happened when they were trying to take him out and he was being resistant. But there's an amount of time where, okay, the bolt cutter's not working. I know we need another bolt cutter coming in. We got to sit this guy up. And actually, we might as well touch on it now. That's what the new policy touches on. There's a new policy, which again was released after the fact. Real quick, North Carolina Sheriff's Office has changed its restraint policy in the wake of last year's death of a man jailed on an assault charge, but the restraint wasn't banned. Well, of course, the restraint can't be banned. You do need at sometimes to restrain the inmate, whether they're a danger to themselves or a danger to others. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office changed the policy on the hog-tie style restraint used on John Neville in December in the county jail. The Winston-Salem Journal reported Friday. Neville was in jail after he was accused of assault on a female. Documents obtained by the newspaper showed the policies were updated on July 9th. So this incident happened in December of 2019. So you're looking at 7-8 months later. According to the policy changes, people who are resisting and have to be placed in a prone restraint position have to be placed in a sitting position as soon as possible. Officers also are required under the policy to monitor the person's color breathing, and level of consciousness. If an individual claims physical distress, medical personnel must be immediately requested to evaluate. That's what the policy says. The policy also says that if an officer must use their body weight to control someone in the prone position, that officer shall exercise extreme caution and shall immediately remove their weight as soon as restraining devices are applied. Officers should avoid sitting or placing their knee on a person's head or neck. An officer must immediately call for medical personnel if an individual does not demonstrate a functional level of consciousness, meaning voluntary movement or speech. Policy change also requires officers to intervene if they see another officer engaged in excessive force and gives medical personnel full autonomy during medical emergencies. Sheriff Bobby Kimbrone Jr. didn't respond to a newspaper request for comment, but he alluded to changes to jail procedure Tuesday when he apologized to Neville's family for the man's death. Video released Wednesday showed Neville was on his stomach in a cell where he was handcuffed with his arms behind his back and his legs up towards his buttocks. That's where the hog tie, they're saying, I believe. The last scene, the second of the two videos released, shows a nurse standing in the window of the cell looking at Neville. In a faint voice, the nurse appears to suggest that Neville wasn't breathing. The guards re-enter the cell, and the nurse checks on Neville, who lets out a groan. The nurse applies her stethoscope and tells the guard, "I can't hear heart rate," and says Neville has to be rolled on his back to be treated. She requested defibrillator and performed CPR on him. Neville suffered a brain injury because his heart stopped beating, which deprived his brain of oxygen, according to an autopsy report, which also said he asphyxiated while being restrained. Five former jail officers and a nurse were charged last month with involuntary manslaughter in his death. Now, Connie, just real quick, just take this in the back of your mind. We'll do the third video first, but you mentioned something about the autonomy. Here it goes. The policy change also requires officers to intervene if they see another officer engaging in excessive force and gives medical personnel full autonomy during medical emergencies. I want to ask you what that means to you, but let's get to the third video first, because when I mentioned this to you, that stuck out to you. But let's discuss that, because I think that may be a pioneer move. I don't know if that's done in other facilities, but again, who am I? So, okay, let me get to the last video. Okay, hold on 1 second. Now you're still muted, right? You're gonna unmute, right? Okay, so hold on, because you're gonna talk us through this one. This is the last video you chose.
All right, so for me, the importance here is that you could see that, the offender is not moving anymore. You could see that he is still on his stomach, and that, I don't know that there's still a need for the level of restraint that's happening, but I can appreciate them calling in the nurse to now come in and do her assessment. Now, could she have volunteered to go in there sooner? For sure, she could have, right? But like the angle that she was at, I don't know that she actually could see what was going on from outside of the door. At this point, she's trying to do a quick assessment, and first look that's her first instinct. Like he's not moving. She doesn't get the heart rate. And I think it's important to note now as well that she's been a part of this code from beginning to now. So he's gone from one room, he's been transported, she's now going to another area. And I'm kind of wondering, why is she alone? Right? Why is she medical personnel on staff during a code as significant as this? Sorry. And so even just now, right? So she's trying to see what else is happening to see if she could be involved any further, but she's trying to get the way of the camera. So I don't know if there was some of that going on, that she couldn't quite get as involved as she could have because she would have been in the way.
Everybody got their gear.
And clearly, the code is not over. Like it seems to me she's still concerned about this patient offender, that he's not moving. Now, when she came out the room, I saw it looked like she had a syringe in her hand. I don't know if it was Tegretol or Dilantin or something. I'm not sure what her protocols would be. But in this instant, it really just looks like she's not giving up. Whereas
I don't know, I couldn't tell.
it could be that protocol. And the fact that she's looking and feels like, you know, something's not right, like he's not moving, like I think that manslaughter is just
Go back in, we gotta make sure.
outrageous.
Gotta make sure.
But we'll talk about that, I guess, when the video is done. This is certainly, in my opinion, not someone who was not being attentive. This is someone who's being professional, who's trying to see her duty through to the end. And custody is responding to her request. You know, which I really do appreciate seeing that.
Hey Connie, what does her level? Is she an RN or?
Yeah, she. It looks like she's an RN.
You need to slide him down. We can slide him down.
Yeah, this is a tough one. You know, she's like, yeah, this.
There you go.
And I think for involuntary manslaughter, I'm looking up the law now. There's got to be something negligent in play as well. And do you feel that she was negligent in any way?
I don't feel that she was negligent in any way. I mean, I feel like she was involved in an appropriate manner. I mean, there's that age-old question. Like, I mean, we hit on that medical autonomy, but there wasn't a point where she's gonna be like, okay, you guys just back up and let me get in there, right? Like, maybe she could have done that sooner, you know. But hindsight is 20/20, right? Like, there's no way for her to be able to do that while they're in the midst of
Okay, we're gonna have to roll on back, guys.
someone who's possibly combative. I think there's also the question of not knowing this inmate's history, his medical history, or his history there. We don't know if this is someone who, you know, who's known for staff assaults, right? Like, as much as you would want her to be involved and be engaged, you know, here she is working on her own, trying to stabilize this offender.
Right, and let me actually, now the video came to, and I want to read a little thing about the involuntary manslaughter. Sorry guys, I had to get us back. So this comes out of North Carolina. Anyone's death is tragic, and everyone knows killing someone in cold blood is wrong. But what if someone's death is a result of an accident or carelessness? So this is what technically a little bit background of what involuntary manslaughter is, and basically what they're trying to pin on the officers and the nurse. The crime of involuntary manslaughter is commonly defined as unintentional killing of another person resulting from recklessness or criminal negligence. As in other states, defense to North Carolina involuntary manslaughter laws include self-defense, accidental death, and actual innocence. The code section is the general statute 14-18. Elements of the crime is a person's guilty of involuntary manslaughter if he or she kills another living human being by an unlawful act that does not amount to a felony and is not ordinarily dangerous to life, or by a culpably negligent act or omission. It's a Class F felony, which could give you up to 13 to 16 months in prison. And as mentioned, the defense is usually self-defense. Death was an accident without negligence or recklessness, actual innocence. And real quick, some common defenses, we talked about that. Even if a person is charged with involuntary manslaughter in criminal court and is acquitted, the deceased family may file a wrongful death claim in civil court. Most wrongful death lawsuits follow in the wake of criminal trials, usually similar evidence, but with a lower standard of proof. Regardless, someone found liable for wrongful death may or may not be convicted of a crime associated with the death. So out of what I just read, do you think that fits into the scenario we have here?
I mean, they say accidental is included in that, right?
Well, wait. I know what you're saying. They say accidental is actually usually used as a defense. Either the involuntary manslaughter happened either self-defense, I didn't mean to kill them, or the death was an accident, but the accident has to be ruled without negligence or recklessness. So if you're being charged for manslaughter, there has to be some act of negligence or recklessness. And usually the self-defense would be, no, the person died, but it was an accident. It wasn't purposeful. It wasn't
got
an
it. Yeah, so I mean, I don't see any of them being reckless. I don't see the negligence. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking with the new policy change, you know, is there some admission? I mean, I feel like that's like the admission that there is something in the policy that didn't exist prior to the event. And so if you haven't given your staff the tools to make the best decisions, I don't know how you hold them accountable for something that you might not have trained them on. You know, like, I think maybe having gone to many codes, perhaps someone who has the experience could use their judgment and say, he's been down for X amount of time, we need to lift him up, right? Like, but I feel like that comes with experience, that comes with someone who has some forethought or the critical thinking, which sometimes can be compromised when you are in an intense situation, such as what we witnessed on camera. So, you know, I find that, you know, involuntary manslaughter is really a significant charge where you could hear that the staff were actually trying to meet his medical need.
And as you said, if they had to adopt the policy changes afterwards, then if you want to push recklessness or negligence, then you should push it on the policy that was created prior, in which they were following. Also, I thought that she was very well put together when she went on the scene. I don't find that she was disorganized. Like I knew she had experience. I also knew the custody staff had experience because I felt that they were very strategic. They weren't scrambling. They kind of knew how to feed off each other. She definitely knew her place. The custody knew their place. Now, the article that we just read talked about one of the policy changes, made sure that they put full autonomy during medical emergencies. Now, real quick, if there's a medical emergency, and I feel that we're getting ready to lose an inmate medically, I am sure a lot of custody, besides, you know, that safety and security side, is going to, you know, give that over to medical. I think the reason why they may have put that in is maybe because there was a conflict in where the nurse thought she could interject. Maybe she thought that she wanted to say something during this interaction with him. Maybe she wanted to say, I know you're doing this for safety and security, but I need to do this for medical. And maybe there was a conflict there. And maybe during that discussion, they're trying to say at this point, do what the nurses says. And that kind of gives that level of control of, I'm not going to say it's a balance of safety and security and medical, but it gives medical the priority, because don't forget too, and my thing here is you also have 5 officers on the scene already. They should be able to handle that. They've already stepped up their level of force. So if there's a reason for her to, hey, turn them, sit them up, do what you got to do, you already have staff in play. You know, if I handcuff him, he can't breathe. You have 5 staff members there, and maybe they're trying to see if they could give a level of control over to medical to push the medical concerns, which I don't want to say. I mean, guys, it is what it is. The medical concerns are probably going to have to take primary over what we have for safety and security. I think that's what they're getting at, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just acknowledging that when it's a life or death situation, time is of the essence. We don't have 12 minutes for someone to not be breathing, right? Like, we know that brain damage is imminent, right? We know that death is imminent. So I think that's just saying, if there is some debate about what should come first, the medical aspect of the situation should be stabilized first, and then everything else comes after. And I know that that is contrary to how many of us operate. Yes, there could be a code. Usually custody's there first. We've come into codes and custody's already doing CPR, right? But then there's also that exchange where medical's on site, medical's going to take over, but that's an open conversation so that everybody knows what's happening from moment to moment. I could see in some places where you don't have that culture of collaboration, where you need that policy to say medical has the autonomy, right? Because some places aren't going to naturally give that power up to medical, which that's someone's judgment, but that could also be the end of someone's life because of a bad judgment call. So I feel like this policy really is covering all bases.
Yeah, I think actually if there's a good partnership between medical and custody, there's not going to be a need to jockey for position. You know, I'm going to know what she needs or he needs, and then they're going to know what custody needs. And I also think that what happens here is that medical may even say, "Hey, I can't get to this individual. They're acting up. They're restrained. They're non-compliant. Help me." So you're going to still be able to do what needs to be done, so you can assist medical. But I think they want to give medical a little bit more say in how that inmate could be restrained, because again, could the restraint conflict with what medical needs to do immediately? And I do understand that 100%. But again, even though it's put in policy, when you're working with professionals and there's that good relationship, yes, you have to cement things in policy, of course, because again, you're not going to have everybody that works well together. We all don't play nice. But with that said, I think when it was this custody, the ones we just saw just now at Forsyth County and that nurse, I think they had an established relationship. And, if she needed something, they were there and vice versa. But I think there may have been, as I watched the video again, there could have been some hesitancy with that nurse into what she felt she could tell them to do or ask them to do. I apologize, or ask them to do. And I think that's why that part of the policy may have came into play, because I think when they may have interviewed her later on or whatever it came out in play, she could have maybe said, and guys, this is a total assumption. Don't get me wrong, because maybe she didn't say this, but I'm just, trying to be objective and thinking out of the box is, well, I noticed that these could have been concerns, but I didn't want to get involved with what custody is doing, which was safety and security, which at that point I thought was paramount. I thought took precedence. But do you agree with that? Do you feel that some nurses may be afraid to say what they want to say because they feel that that safety and security part is paramount?
Absolutely. I mean, we've all got different personalities, right? I mean, I've had nurses that I work with that were very assertive. That they will jump in the middle of something if they firmly believe this is the right thing to do, this is what they need to do, and it is a life and death situation. And then you have some nurses that are a little more timid, who may not be as assertive, or who may just be like, I'm going to respect the chain of command. And when custody tells me that, the coast is clear for me to do whatever, that's when I'll get involved. And either way, I think, there is maybe some safe caution that, some of the nurses may take, just to make sure that, working relationships don't be negatively impacted, or also to make sure that, the safety and security part of things aren't impacted. Like, they're not serving as an obstacle or an impediment to stabilizing things from a safety and security perspective. And they're just there, ready to jump in to do their medical stuff once the coast is clear.
Well, you know what? Also, maybe we should stop looking at it as two separate functions. I mean, obviously you have the two different departments, but we do have the same end game. We want the person to survive. So, maybe if there was a way that the functions could blend, instead of looking at it as, I got to do this and I got to do this and this takes priority over this. Actually, it's working together where, it's a blend of both functions, correct?
Yeah, but in that video, you saw that. You could see that in the video. Like, he was on his side in the beginning. She was trying to get a blood pressure. At a point, they were trying to make sure she could get the blood pressure. And she says, oh, I can do it by his lower arm, because they were trying to get his upper arm free. She said, I can do it by his lower arm. So I feel like the communication was there, and they were actually trying to work together to make sure that he was stable. I think it was when he started to have that altered mental state and he was started getting combative, that things began to escalate. And, you know, I think rightfully so, she kind of just got out the way, because it's much easier to work with a patient who's actually compliant, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's just the reality.
Right. And also they added in the policy about the pressure on somebody. And I think they added that because they were still holding him down at some point when they were trying to get the handcuffs off him. So I guess why he's being restrained, you know, he's in his restraints. You don't want to put the added pressure on the individual. In this case here, it was not on his neck. It wasn't, you know, across his back. I believe it's probably, as defined by policy, on his shoulders. And the reason why you have the legs up is because obviously that's another safety and security concern, but it could look like someone is being hogtied. And I believe and we did talk about this, they were going to focus on that 12, however many minutes the individual was in restraints waiting to get those handcuffs off. And then obviously he's on his stomach at that time. And me and Soto had mentioned that maybe at that point when, again, not Monday night quarterback, and we're just looking at things, and some of us have been through this before, but maybe at that point when it's delayed and you just can't get those handcuffs off, let's get this guy sitting up, let's put him in a restraint chair, and let's go ahead and, you know, and plus that alleviates the pressure of time. We already got the guy, you know, sitting down. He's in a comfortable position. You know, we'll get the bolt cutters, you know, when they get here. But at this point here, there was a pressure for time because the inmate was still on his stomach. So do you agree with that part of the policy where if again, you have this person here that, again, those bolt cutters broke. Do you believe that person should have been sat up at that point and brought into a restraint chair?
For sure. I mean, because he was already in medical distress. And though we are not quite sure what that distress was, where it originated from, we also don't know what other underlying, you know, medical issues that person may have had. And ultimately, we want to be able to make sure that that person is able to get in as much oxygen as possible. And we know that compressing the chest doesn't allow for that to happen if they're on their stomach, which is why, you know, most of the time they are in a prone position so that you can optimize how much oxygen gets into the lungs.
All right, so here, another tough question that just came my way. But again, there was a policy change, right? We know that. But do you think that's where they could see this as being negligent?
I don't know about that. I mean, I feel like if you guys received training to tell you as much, then yes, I could see the negligence, because you have been trained, you have been informed, as opposed to having an expectation that you know something that's not within your scope of knowledge, right? Like, custody isn't medical, medical isn't custody. While we may understand each other's roles, there are intricacies in both of our roles, right? Every time I do a video with you guys, I learn more about custody than I've known over the last 15 or 16 years, right? And I think it's just understanding that you cannot have an expectation of someone to know something that you've not trained them on. I think, yes, you can say, oh, it's common sense, but I don't know that it's necessary common sense when you're in the heat of the moment, you're in the heat of the situation. Are we thinking that? Or are we now just focused on, holy crap, the cuff key broke, right? Like, I mean, because that's the added pressure of now we're on video, cuff key is broken, what does this crap look like, right? Like, that's playing in your head no matter how you might try to deny that, you know? So I think there's just, I don't know that the accountability to know something that you weren't trained to know is the grounds for, you know, the manslaughter or the negligence. I think if you were trained and you had that information, it was written somewhere, something, that's different. You just didn't read it, okay, that's negligence. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, I searched up hogtied inmate, and it's pretty much every article that's written on John Neville. It's everything out of North Carolina. So obviously they've somehow determined that was him being hogtied, and therefore that is illegal. You definitely don't want to have somebody hogtied. But again, it's weird because I know they're trying to put on the restraint, so I didn't see it originally as them having the inmate hogtied. It only became that way because they couldn't get the handcuffs off that individual, because at the whole time the inmate was speaking, he was moving. But I will guarantee this, if those handcuffs didn't break, these officers, or like Russ said, if there was a different outcome and the inmate had survived, these officers and nurse could have gotten an accommodation, but the handcuffs broke. There could have been concern with how they adapted and adjusted to that. And now what could have been an accommodation, because I thought it was perfect up until that point, and that's where the media is going to start questioning it. So we have to, mention that. We can't ignore that because we know that's where their focus is. But if that didn't happen, these same people would be getting an accommodation. So look at this. I mean, just so people can get a lesson here in the life and death situations that we face, they were on the verge of getting an accommodation for saving this inmate's life or whatever it could be. But what could be seen as one mistake or one error could be seen that way, depending. Now it drops to the extreme of that. Could be charged with involuntary manslaughter, which again I feel is rather extreme because as you watch the whole video in context, and that was the key of why we put out the video the first time around. Because if you only put out that one little scene without the context, well, oh yeah, they're careless. Well, wait a second, hold on. Let's watch every second of that video so you could see how much they cared and how compassionate they were to this individual and just that working relationship. But just that one little, it's not, I don't want to say little, but you know what I mean, that one possible error in judgment. Connie, you have anything you want to say in closing?
I would just say that, it's tough working in corrections, no matter what role you play. And you just never know what kind of situation you're going to find yourself in from day to day. I would just tell the audience, do your best, follow the policies, and really, if something's going awry and you could say something, just say something. Speak up because, it could be a matter of life and death. It could be a matter of jobs loss. It could be a matter of manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, which is crazy, but, it really is, don't hesitate to use your voice because it's that one time that you do it that could save a life.
Right, and the reason why we did this video is obviously someone else is going to grab a hold of it, create their own story, so we jump on it with at least an experienced perspective to try to be fair and objective, because we know exactly where the media was going to attack, and me and Soto hit it up at that day, and look what happened. We found out a couple of days, it's pretty much exactly what we said in the video, and then just now with the dialogue here, which I thought was fair, and we did not isolate the context. The context is involved in what we were saying, and it's very hard for us to look at this and, find fault because we also see that we thought that the people were going above and beyond, but then something happened and how that could be interpreted, but no one's interpreting what happened before or after. It's just that one incident. And actually, one last thing, Connie, before you go, because there was one thing. You served as both as the administration of a medical department at a facility, and then you also served as a union rep, but more focused on the management side. If this was one of your employees that you were overseeing, would you be writing this employee up or would you be defending the employee?
I would be defending the employee, particularly because one, I would take ownership that I have this employee working a medical code by herself. So even if there was any skill questions or anything like that, which I don't think there are in this case, at least she would have someone partnered with her to help her through the process. And even if she could have spoken up, if she was partnered with someone, she might have felt a little more empowered to speak up because collectively they would have been able to bring whatever concern forward if there was a concern. I think the other thing is, it looked like this woman was handling herself well under pressure, and she was being professional and following some sort of protocol because she was operating in a space that seemed very systematic. I don't know what their protocol is, but certainly I would pull the protocol, review the protocol, look at the tape. Did she follow all these things? Was she able to do those things? Because that's what they're going to do anyway, right? Where was she negligent at is really the question, which I can't see that on the video. I think that she did a great job. I think that she worked well under pressure. Are there things that she probably could have done different? Absolutely. But I think that for me, as an administrator, I would have been in support of this person who didn't just walk away, who didn't just say, oh, custody's doing their own thing, I'm out of here, right? Like, she didn't take on that kind of attitude. It was, I'm a part of this team and I want to see this code through. I want to make sure that whatever care I provide, I do it all the way to the end. And she did just that.
Right. And the thing is, if this goes a distance and she does get charged with this, she loses her certification, correct?
Yes, she can lose her license.
And custody obviously could lose their job as well, which is just,
yeah.
You know, if you're watching this whole video, they were very professional the whole way through, and it just kind of breaks your heart if that turns out to be the outcome. We possibly could have lost good people in this field. I mean, when I was talking to Soto said that even if you had to discipline them, if they pushed it down that there had to be discipline, it wouldn't be as severe as that. It would be some form of retraining. Yeah. You know, if you had, would that be okay with you if that was what it came down to, retraining?
Absolutely. I mean, because, you know, the reality in my mind is that, does this person lose so all the lives that she may have saved already, right? Like these situations happen, right? Like people die, which is awful, right? But like, people don't die and nurses go home and celebrate. Like, that's not what happens. Like, it's a devastation to lose a patient. And in this case, this woman has lost a patient. And I don't think that she's taken that lightly. I don't think that yes, involuntary manslaughter is probably worse than she could be thinking about her own self. Like, as she's replaying every step that she took, as she's replaying everything that she did to like save this guy's life, and all of the second guessing she's doing of herself, you know. But the reality is that, okay, if it's seizure protocol and I missed a step, retrain me on what I should be doing. You know, maybe I need to learn how to work better under pressure. Maybe there's other things that's going on that need to be addressed. I don't know that this woman losing her job or losing her ability to practice is the answer.
Yeah, and that's something me and Louie agreed on as well. Again, we don't know what it is to be in their shoes. We're lucky enough to be able to review this after all the facts are in and provide our thoughts, but we do it in an effort so people can learn. But again, being in her shoes at that moment, being in custody's shoes at that moment, you know, would we have done something differently? We don't know. We just know it after the fact because we're giving out more information. But once we get this information, we find it, you know, that we have to put it out there because, again, you can learn from this as well. And that's the key. You know, we want to be able to learn from it and let people know that, hey, guys, this is what happened. And maybe these are the routes that we could take for next time. But like you said, I mean, think about what the agency did. The agency updated their policy. So they're doing that, you know, but are you going to hold, is that policy going to be like changed now and then you're going to hold them still responsible? Because again, that's unfair, but you know, we'll see how that plays out in the long run. But as always, guys, the show is here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, please check out the episode we did with Louis Soto. If you haven't seen it yet, very good dialogue from the custody perspective. And as always, guys, please, if you like the content, subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell will notify you every time I post a video. And as always, guys, stay safe.